Evolution, a deliberate yet subliminal process for all but humankind. We cannot wait.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
He's on the move. That's cool.
Coming right up, a grisly discovery by cave explorers, an ancient dump of human bones, is raising excitement, debate, and the question, were ethnic British tribes brutal cannibals? The Natural History Museum is a firm favourite for tourists and visitors to London, but only a fraction of the 70 million specimens of the world's plant and animal life kept in the museum's vaults are on public display. And visitors see nothing of the frontline scientific research work carried out by the museum's staff. All that is going to change with the opening of the new Darwin Centre. A stellar explosion of such intense magnitude that it produces a massive burst of energy that is more than 10 times that of the lifetime output of our Sun. This explosive phenomenon is called a supernova. And scientists in Australia have fitted a great white shark with a sophisticated tracking device. They're trying to understand more about shark behaviour, and in particular, the recent spate of attacks on humans. And where time begins. A hole or swallet in limestone rock near the village of Alveston leads to hidden caverns below the surface. Amateur enthusiasts search and explore these chambers for fun. But when a group of weekend adventurers explored this pothole, they stumbled on a pile of bones dating from the Celtic era, which has cast a disturbing new light on ancient British history. A femur found amongst the 2,000-year-old bones has been split in a way that could only have been done deliberately to scrape out the rich marrow inside the bone. There's one school of thinking that this is actually cannibalism, but another slant is if the Britons had actually been cannibals, it would have been written about. So this is probably abnormal behaviour rather than normal. Sacrifice and cannibalism may have been part of a brutal Celtic rite to pagan gods and an elaborate prayer for victory on the battlefield. Obviously, it didn't work because the Romans were able to defeat them very rapidly. The massive facade and spiralling towers of the Natural History Museum have been a feature of the London skyline for 120 years. The Ark, as the museum is affectionately known, began life in the 18th century, housing the collection of plants and animal specimens made by Sir Hans Sloane, the founder of the British Museum. Today, advanced technology is used to bring to life the ancient and modern inhabitants of the natural world for the thousands of annual visitors. But the museum's aim has remained the same: to continue to collect items from the natural world and then to use that information for the good of humanity. To understand the natural world and how precious it is, to be able to understand the environment and medical help that relies upon animals and plants. Vilma Baratan is a practicing homeopath. She's also a researcher, using the museum's rich store of plant specimens and scientific expertise to better understand the curative effects of plants. Her first mammoth task was to standardize the names of all the thousands of plants used in homeopathy. That's done, so she's moving on to try and establish a more scientific basis for the reported curative effects of plants. Educating visitors about the natural world needs imagination. Waiting round a corner to ambush visitors to the new Predators exhibition is this fearsome spider from Australia. Other computerized models graphically illustrate the astonishing variety of ways animals hunt their prey. A recreation of a tropical rainforest ushers visitors into an exhibition devoted to the Earth's precious ecological balance. Museum scientists are meanwhile keeping an eye on the effects of climate change. Sandflies are common in tropical countries where their bite spreads from animals to humans, a parasitic disease called leishmaniasis. 12 million people suffer from the disease. Children, the elderly, and those weakened by other diseases like AIDS are particularly at risk. Shazia Mahamdali studies the way sandflies that spread the parasite react to environmental change. She's concerned that global warming may be encouraging sandflies to spread to northern Europe, threatening millions more with leishmaniasis. They're already into France, and there have been some cases in Paris. In the labyrinthine vaults of the museum, there is row upon row of shelves, each stocked with specimens of the world's flora and fauna. Few ever get to see these carefully collected and catalogued creatures, but that's about to change. Work has already started on transporting some of the fish and reptiles in the museum's storerooms to the new Darwin Centre, the first phase of which opens September 2002. The centre, bearing the name of the father of the theory of evolution, will give the public much better access to the museum's exhibits and also the science that goes on here. People, it seems, want to be able to understand science for themselves and make their own judgments about issues of the day. The £27 million building contains temperature-control cabinets that will preserve the valuable specimens from damage and degradation. Some were gathered during the historic voyages of explorer Captain Cook. An internet link will give a worldwide audience a virtual window on the work of the scientists here. There'll be video links and a whole range of other methods by which the visitors can see science in action and talk to the scientists. The Earth galleries give the visitor a chance to find out what goes on deep beneath the narrow strip of the Earth's crust we share with the world's wildlife. The museum houses one of the world's largest collection of meteorites, rocks that have fallen to Earth from space. They date from the birth of the solar system about 4.5 billion years ago. There is no material on Earth as old as this, so researchers are keen to use these lumps of ancient cosmic debris to find out more about how the Sun and planets formed from the solar nebula, the cloud of dust and gas caused by the Big Bang. In the early days, before or just after the planets accumulated, they each had roughly the same composition. And so, looking at meteorites will tell us what was the starting composition of these planets and how the processes that have occurred since have changed the overall composition. Meteorites that originate from Mars are being closely studied for any evidence of past life from this now dead planet. Here, a sample of meteorite material originating in the asteroid belt near Jupiter has been crushed and mixed with fluid ready for analysis. An isotope analyzer detects the percentage of different elements in the meteorite. In this case, the focus is on iron. The Natural History Museum has strong international links. It runs its own field station in Belize in the West Indies and is collaborating on a project to map the plants of Central America with the University of Mexico and the Botanical Gardens in Missouri. Once it's fully open, the new Darwin Centre will help make known to the wider public the work of this unique institution, educating us in the passage of history.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
On the night of February 23, 1987, at the Los Campañas Observatory in southern Chile, Ian Shelton photographed the large Magellanic Cloud. As he developed his plates, he saw a bright object that was not on the previous plates. He thought it was only a flaw, but he walked outside to check it. In the sky, he saw a star he'd never seen before, an object appearing so suddenly he knew it must be a supernova. Ian Shelton telegraphed his discovery to the International Astrophysical Union. Using global computer networks, the IAU announced to the world the discovery of one of the biggest cataclysms that one can imagine in the universe. Designated SN 1987A, the supernova is located in the Tarantula Nebula in the Large Magellanic Cloud, the galaxy nearest to ours. Even though the supernova is 170,000 light-years away, it's the closest supernova since Johannes Kepler saw one in 1604 in the Milky Way. It's a rare experience for a supernova to be visible to the naked eye, although in 1054 the Crab supernova was visible even in daylight. For its part, supernova 1987A was clearly visible at night. It was once a faint star, although in fact a blue supergiant, about 15 times the mass of our Sun. But a star is always subject to its own gravity. When its hydrogen becomes depleted, gravity will take control and the core of the star will contract and get hotter. The supernova will occur at the end of a massive star's lifetime, when its nuclear fuel is exhausted and it is no longer supported by the release of nuclear energy. If the star's iron core is massive enough, then it will collapse. In this giant nucleus, the protons and electrons of the iron are so close to each other that they combine to form neutrons. Thus, the core of the collapsing star becomes a giant ball of neutrons, a neutron star. If a collapsing star were big enough, its gravitational force would overcome even the forces that hold atomic nuclei together, and the core would become a black hole. But if the star is not massive enough to form a black hole, it reaches a point where its core cannot collapse any further. At this so-called point of maximum scrunch, the core bounces back and blows the rest of the star out into space with an explosive energy more than 10 times the lifetime output of our Sun. This explosion is called a supernova. The energy emitted by a supernova is primarily composed of neutrinos, particles that very rarely interact with matter. Neutrinos can be detected in huge tanks of purified water buried in mines in Japan and the United States. 3 hours before the first optical observations of the supernova were made, these detectors noted neutrino emissions somewhere in the direction of the Large Magellanic Cloud. The neutrinos interacted with the purified water and caused flashes of light which registered on photodetectors in the tanks. These detections were not discovered until later, but they confirmed theories about how a supernova explodes. The energy of the star creates a super-strong shockwave that runs outward towards the star's surface. When the shockwave reaches the star's surface, it very quickly heats the surface layers and brightens them. This is the moment when distant observers first learn that a supernova is exploding. In the year following the supernova, several experiments measured extensive gamma-ray radiation. The data was gathered by NASA's Solar Maxima mission already in orbit around the Earth, and instrument-laden balloons which were launched in Australia. Japan launched the Genga satellite, which detected some of the scattered X-rays. NASA's rocket experiments launched from Australia also experienced radiation over several wavelengths. Other rocket-borne missions and the International Ultraviolet Explorer observed the ultraviolet spectrum. These measurements revealed information about the density and temperature of the supernova, and the formation of molecules surrounding the supernova and in nearby space. The Kuiper Airborne Observatory flew several experiments over New Zealand to observe in this region of the spectrum. Since infrared wavelengths are absorbed by the air, the experiments were conducted high in the atmosphere. Observations in all ranges of the spectrum were made. Scientists were able to gain valuable insight into natural lithiosynthesis, the formation of heavy elements. Our solar system was created from these elements, and so the study of the deaths of stars will enable us to gain a better understanding of the history of our Earth and the rest of the universe. Recently, one morning in Slovenia, early risers at the beach were surprised to observe 7 basking sharks close to the shore. Although this very rare species of shark is said not to pose a threat to man, there were no swimmers willing to share the clear waters with the new arrivals. Nevertheless, some lucky tourists nearby enjoyed their unique and close-up glimpse at these sea giants, swimming within their natural habitat. There are 34 species of shark living in the Mediterranean Sea, of which only a few are of danger to humans. Basking sharks live over the continental shelves. They're highly migratory, with seasonal appearances in certain localities and subsequent disappearances. They can be found alone and also in groups of as many as 100 sharks. These sharks are probably the original subject of the sea monster stories, since they prefer to swim directly under the water with their dorsal and caudal fins penetrating the surface. Often they follow each other, giving the impression that they're one long animal. Years ago, the animal was hunted for its huge liver with its high content of vitamin A and oil, which was used to keep lamps burning. And due to their low reproduction rates and the strong pressure brought to bear on their numbers by the fishing industry, these animals now appear on the list of endangered shark species. Scientists in Australia are trying to learn more about a very different species of shark, a man-eater known as the great white or white pointer. The shark is the second of his species to be tagged in this way by Australian researchers from the CSIRO. From now on, each time the shark surfaces, his high-tech transmitter will send a signal to a satellite and his whereabouts will be beamed back to the group's base in Hobart. Following a number of shark attacks in Australian waters, interest in the behaviour of great whites is high. However, scientists admit many more of the creatures will need to be caught, tagged and released before a complete picture of their habits can be formed. And still on sharks, environmental watch group WildAid says about 100 million of the animals are caught by fishermen every year, many just for their fins. Shark fins are prized throughout Asia for their medicinal value and use in Chinese cooking. WildAid tested 10 shark fin samples from 3 major dealers in Bangkok's Chinatown district and found all 10 contained dangerously high levels of mercury and other heavy metals. Some samples were as much as 42 times the level considered safe for human consumption. Many of the fins were also found to have been pumped full of unidentified chemicals to increase their size. Hong Kong is the global hub for shark fins, but new research shows that Thailand, formerly an export country, is now importing fins from Hong Kong because it has become too difficult to catch sharks in Thai waters. The Thai Ministry of Public Health has since issued a warning advising consumers to avoid eating shark's fin until safety checks have been completed. Mercury is especially dangerous for pregnant women, as it can cause neurological defects in babies. The governments of Australia and the United States have issued health warnings to pregnant women about eating the soup. According to WildAid, research shows that shark fin has no real nutritional value. The dish is popular throughout Asia, where it's considered a delicacy. In Thailand, it can be purchased in top Chinese restaurants as well as from vendors on the street. The mercury in the sharks is a result of pollution in the oceans. Sharks, being at the top of the food chain, consume large numbers of fish that contain mercury and retain high levels of it in their bodies. Sharks perform a vital function at the head of the food chain, and dwindling shark populations will have a serious effect on the marine ecosystem. A message that environmental groups are having trouble getting across to people still happy to dish out as much as $100 for a single bowl of soup. And after all, diners are basically just eating cartilage, the same material that makes up fingernails and hair. Where time begins. Greenwich, an historic area of London and home to the Greenwich Meridian. It's a fitting site for the newly refurbished National Maritime Museum. The money's been well spent. A breathtaking new architectural space has been created under the largest glass roof of its kind in Europe. Inside is a series of new permanent exhibition areas which celebrate Britain's maritime heritage and look to the past, present and future story of the sea. 98% of British trade still comes by sea. In the new galleries, this fusion of old and new is apparent everywhere. There's the Robin Knox Johnson yacht Suhail, which was the first boat to go round the world single-handedly. And the first powerboat to top 100 miles an hour on open water, Miss Britain III. There are images, sculptures and audio-visual works. And a host of interactive exhibits with commentaries. Exploring the deep and how it used to be done. This old whaling cannon could have come straight out of Moby Dick. Tony Bullimore, the yachtsman who was dramatically rescued off Antarctica, says the museum is essentially about Britain. It's a museum where Britain's past, present and future meet in an ideal setting.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The whole team on the move. That's cool.